They didn't leave because he hurt them. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't careless, he simply wasn't enough. Not rich enough to buy their comfort, not loud enough to demand their attention, not broken enough to beg them to stay. So they walked, and he let them. No chase, no bargaining, no pleas. Because a man who fears only God knows what leaves you was never yours, and what's yours will never leave. The chair across from him remained empty for days, then weeks. Eventually, it just became another piece of furniture. But every morning he still brewed 2 cups, not out of hope, but out of principle, because he wasn't bitter. He was just learning how to hold space for absence. He didn't curse their name, didn't scroll their lives online, didn't ask anyone why they left. He simply carried the silence they gifted him, like a stone in his coat pocket, heavy, unseen, but real. God was still watching, even when they weren't, and that was enough. For now. It's the silence between the storms. The house didn't creak from ghosts. It creaked from memory. Every footstep he took echoed against the walls like a prayer unfinished. Every light he turned off felt like lowering the flag on another long day. He didn't sit alone because he wanted to. He sat alone because solitude didn't ask questions. It just sat with him, like an old friend, worn, unbothered. He didn't scream into pillows, didn't blast music to drown the ache, didn't post quotes for pity. He just sat, with tears only God saw, with pain too deep for language. To some nights he couldn't even form words. He just breathed. Inhale, exhale, repeat, while hope and heartbreak wrestled in his chest. Every night, life dared him to quit, to stop trying, to lie down and stay there. And every night, he whispered back, "You chose the wrong man." Because even in darkness, even when God felt silent, even when his hands trembled from carrying too much for too long, he didn't break. He bent, but he did not break. That's the thing about real strength. It's not always loud. It's not always seen. Sometimes it just looks like a man sitting in a dark room, still breathing, still believing. Section 3. The fire didn't burn him, it built him. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought the quiet meant he had nothing left. But silence was his forge, and every quiet hour was another hammer strike. He didn't post revenge, didn't seek applause, didn't run to crowds. He walked alone through fire, and the fire, it didn't consume him, it refined him. They betrayed him, not once, not twice, more than he could count. A friend who shared secrets in whispers that weren't his to tell. A brother who chose convenience over loyalty. A lover who looked him in the eyes while lying. Each wound felt final, each cut deep, but he didn't retreat. He bled, then healed, then walked again. Every closed door became a wall to push against. Every insult became a stepping stone beneath his tired feet. He didn't keep score, he kept scripture. He didn't light fires to burn bridges. He let the fire within light his path. He learned that walking with God often means walking alone. That shadowed paths are still holy ground. That silence can roar louder than rage. He understood. The world only honors resilience after it's tested, but heaven rewards the ones who endure even when unseen. But he wasn't afraid of the fire, because the fire didn't take him down. It took off everything that wasn't him, and what remained was steel. 'Cause pain shapes the warrior, but faith keeps him standing. They laughed while he bled. They didn't understand him, so they mocked him, mocked his quiet, his gentleness. his trust in what they could not see. They laughed while he bled silently in corners they never cared to look. They called him foolish for praying before meals. They said, faith won't pay your bills. Hope won't fix your broken heart. Prayer won't keep the lights on. Still he prayed. Still he worked. Still he believed. And not because it was easy, but because he knew pain is temporary, but obedience echoes in eternity. He smiled sometimes, not out of joy, but out of knowing something they didn't. That storms don't scare the man who has already lived through one inside his soul. That ridicule doesn't wound the man who's already bleeding internally. That laughter, no matter how loud, can't drown out the whisper of God. They laughed while he bled, but every drop became a seed. And one day, the same ones who laughed will walk past fields they never planted and wonder how he grew something from nothing. He'll say nothing because real strength doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes undeniable because their laughter was only loud until his silence became proof. His faith wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. They wanted loud faith. He gave them quiet fire. They wanted spectacle. He offered substance. He never screamed, I believe. He didn't quote scripture to be admired. He didn't need a stage or a microphone. He just lived it, breath by breath, step by step. When his pockets were empty, when food was scarce, when the heater broke in winter, he didn't shout at God. He didn't curse the sky. He whispered, I trust you still. When bills stacked up, when rejection came again, when loneliness visited like a familiar ghost, he didn't run, didn't post bitterness online, didn't abandon what anchored him. He just stood, even if the ground shook beneath him, even if the world misunderstood him. Because faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence in a storm, the pause before the next breath. Sometimes it's the last ounce of strength, whispering to heaven, I still believe. He didn't need people to understand. He just needed God to be watching. And God was, always, even in the silence, especially in the silence. Because loud faith impresses people, but quiet faith, that's what moves mountains. The man who never surrendered. He never looked like a hero. No cape, no armor, no audience, just cracked hands, tired eyes, and a heart held together by silent prayers. He worked, he fell, he cried, he tried again. He wasn't perfect, he was persistent, he wasn't polished, he was real. And they said, he will give up soon. And they waited for the stumble that would keep him down, waited for the moment he'd whisper, I'm done. But every time life shoved him to the ground, he rose, sometimes slower, sometimes trembling, but always, he rose. Because surrender was never in his blood, only resurrection, only a fire that refused to die. He didn't inspire crowds, didn't trend online, didn't have applause follow him into rooms. But heaven took note of every step, every silent sacrifice, every invisible battle, every whisper that sounded like a roar to God. And they judged his life by what they saw, but they never knew the cost of the soul that refused to stop moving. He didn't wait to be rescued. He trusted the one who watched him climb, even when no one else did. And when they asked, why did not you quit? He simply said, because surrender was never an option. He didn't win with power. He endured with prayer, and that made all the difference. They called him a warrior. They didn't call him a warrior when he first began. not when he was broken, not when he was barely standing, not when his prayers were soaked in tears. They waited until the scars faded, until the battles were won, until his silence turned into strength. Then they said, "He's always been strong, he's always been resilient." But he knew the truth. He had not been born strong. He had become strong on the nights he didn't quit, on the mornings he got up with shaking hands, on the days when faith was his only meal. They called him a warrior, but not because of the victories, because of the valleys, because he didn't just survive them, he learned how to praise in them. Not with shouts, not with perfect words, but with the kind of praise that sounds like breathing. One inhale of faith, one exhale of surrender. He wasn't a warrior because he won every fight. He was a warrior because he stayed in the ring, even when bleeding, even when alone. Because warriors don't always roar. Sometimes they just whisper, "I will try again tomorrow." His armor wasn't metal. It was prayer. It was patience. It was praise whispered in the dark. His sword wasn't steel. It was scripture. It was truth. They called him a warrior. He found peace in obedience. He stopped asking for signs, stopped begging for open doors, stopped demanding timelines from God, because eventually he realized obedience is not about outcomes, it's about alignment. He obeyed when it was easy, then he obeyed when it wasn't, when it meant walking alone, when it cost him friends, when it made no earthly sense. He still obeyed. Not because he was blind, but because he trusted what he couldn't yet see. The path was often unclear, but the voice, familiar, gentle, firm, faithful. Sometimes obedience meant silence. Sometimes it meant walking away. Sometimes it meant staying when every part of him wanted to run. But every time he obeyed, peace followed. Not comfort, not ease, but peace. Because peace isn't found in outcomes, it's found in obedience. And when the world around him shook, when his plans crumbled, when nothing went the way he thought it should, he still had peace, because he still had God. And God honors obedience, even in the quiet, even in the dark, even when no one else sees. He found peace, not by controlling life, but by surrendering it. And that surrender was his greatest strength. The prayers are accepted. There were nights he didn't know what to say. He just folded his hands, bowed his head, and let his silence speak. He never prayed for riches, never begged for revenge, never asked to be admired. He prayed for strength to endure what hurt, to forgive who didn't deserve it, to trust what he could not see. He whispered names of people who hurt him, not so God would punish them, but so his heart would stay clean. He prayed for direction, for peace, for clarity when the fog felt endless. And slowly, like dew on dry ground, the answers came. Not as lightning, not as thunder, but as doors that didn't slam shut, as burdens that felt just a little lighter, as moments of peace in the middle of a storm. And he didn't shout when prayers were answered. He didn't post testimonies online. He just wept, softly, because he knew heaven heard what earth ignored. While when no one else was listening, God was. And every whisper, every tear that hit the floor was counted. Because the prayers of the righteous aren't wasted, they are planted. And one day, what was whispered in the dark will bloom in the light. Yeah, the wait was the test. Waiting doesn't break a man, it reveals him. And in the waiting, he found who he really was. It wasn't just about time. It was about trust. Could he still believe, even when nothing changed? Could he still serve, even when no one clapped? Could he still love, even when love wasn't returned? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still no answer, no sign, no shift, just silence, just waiting, but he didn't stop. He kept showing up, kept praying, kept working. He didn't let the wait become a weight, because faith doesn't rush God's timing. Faith trusts it. And while others ran ahead, built without him, grasped at temporary comforts, he waited, not because he was weak, but because he was wise. He knew what's built in waiting is stronger than what's built in haste, because what God brings, no man can steal. The wait wasn't punishment, it was preparation, and now he's ready, not just to receive, but to carry, because the man who waited is not the same man who started. He's stronger now, deeper now, wiser now. The God who remembers. When others forgot, God remembered. When they moved on, God moved closer. When the world scrolled past his pain, God paused and stayed. He thought he was forgotten, invisible, irrelevant, but heaven never stopped writing his name, never stopped watching his steps, never stopped holding his broken pieces. They forgot his kindness, his loyalty, his long nights and quiet sacrifices. But God wrote it all down. Every cup of water, every dollar shared, every smile given in the middle of heartbreak. Not one act missed, not one sigh wasted. Heaven has a better memory than earth, and one day God will return it all, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. He served quietly, but heaven noticed loudly. He stayed faithful, and the God who remembers, he never forgets to reward. He is real warrior. They didn't know his battles. They didn't see the nights he fed others while starving. They didn't hear the prayers he whispered for those who betrayed him. But when he walked into a room, the silence respected him. Not because he fought with fists, not because he sought revenge, but because he carried something deeper, unshakable faith, unbreakable hope, unseen scars. He didn't march, he endured. He didn't threaten, he stayed. He didn't boast, he believed. And in a world that screams to be seen, he whispered his way through storms. Not because he was weak, but because he was rooted. They called him a warrior, but he wasn't after the title. He was just a man who never stopped, never surrendered, and feared no one but God. And that made all the difference. The warrior's testament. He began as a man left behind, quiet, unseen, and underestimated. But every silence, every unanswered prayer, every step alone was a lesson. In obedience, he found peace. In prayer, he found connection. In waiting, he found strength. He didn't need to be loud to be heard. He didn't need applause to matter. He didn't need ease to stand tall. He learned that God's path is often the loneliest, but also the most powerful. While others laughed, he stayed faithful. While they ran, he knelt. While they forgot, he forgave. And in every sacrifice, in every quiet moment, he became who God intended. Not a perfect man, but a faithful one. And he didn't just survive, he transformed. Through fire, silence, betrayal, and delay, he rose. He was never after the spotlight. He was after the truth. And in the end, the man who had nothing gained everything. 'Cause heaven never forgot him, and his faith, it never failed. He is not just a man, he is a message, a living proof that surrender is strength, That belief is warfare, and that God always remembers his warriors. And the end of the page, but not the end of the story. We wall. If you like the video, then subscribe the channel and share the video. It will motivate me for the next level.